God bless everyone. We're continuing this teaching series on the Canada's roots, and we were finishing off on Sandford Fleming, and some of the things in terms of engineers we're going to look at now. It has a high calling, and because it's a link between science and society. Engineers calculating the cost of change, understands the financial and the political. You have to mix a lot of things, and that's what Sandford Fleming had to do. And he had combined his faith in all this. He said he saw engineering through the eyes of Isaiah 40, which talks about every valley being exalted. He said, "It is one of the misfortunes of the profession to which I am proud to belong, that our business is to make and not to enjoy. We no sooner make a rough place smooth than we must move to another and fresh field, leaving others to enjoy what we have accomplished." And so he had the biblical perspective, Isaiah 40. In 1872, he and his good friend, Reverend George Grant, went to BC and led an expedition to BC and in order to survey the future of Canada Pacific Railway. And they wrote a travel log, and it became a bestseller, so like a little book. And both of them, they shared a deep faith, conviction of a Christian faith, and all the trials and the tribulations that they went to in terms of the railroad system and placing and making and surveying, and so they needed the Christian character there. And interesting enough, every time, that he always found time to worship God on the Sunday. And even so, he kneeled at the tracks, and he was designed. He said he wrote a worship service manual for all those people that worked in construction crews and travelers with busy schedules, which goes to say that he knew what his priorities were. And it doesn't matter how hard you are working or what your time is, you should always set time for God. He gives us the strength. He gives us the knowledge. He gives us the ability, the gifts and the talents. And he was always inventing, this man. He created Canada's first postage stamp, the 3-penny beaver. He founded in 1849 the Royal Canadian Institute, which became the Royal Society of Canada, a leading scientific institute. He wrote 12 books, served as Chancellor of Queen University for 35 years. And in spite of so much opposition, he built the world's first sub-Pacific cable bringing instantaneous communication around much of the world. And that's when Queen Victoria knighted him as Sir Sandford Fleming in 1897 for that accomplishment. Now we move on to another great man of God, Timothy Eaton, who was born in 1835 and died in 1907. He was a businessman, and those who have gone to in Toronto in the Eaton Center, every time you see the Eaton Center, just remember this man, Timothy Eaton. And he came from Ireland, and he worked there as an apprentice, and he worked long hours, and that influenced a lot of his business transactions and ideas in Canada when he established the Eaton Centers. And because he knew what it was to be a worker, and he knew how it was to work hard, long hours, and he was influential in starting a lot of things in terms to encourage workers to work less and to give more time to their families. And he mandated that in all advertisement, the exact truth should be told with regards to the goods offered for sale. So he was a man of integrity. He wanted the truth. He didn't want this false advertising. And he said every customer, if a customer is not satisfied, the price should be refunded. He didn't ever sell tobacco, liquor, or playing cards, and he didn't allow them in his home. So a man of conviction. He knew what he stood for. And again, he urged all who worked for him to not use any kind of deception or tricks or gimmicks to get the people to buy something. He actually said, if to use no deception in the smallest degree, nothing you cannot defend before God or man. So if you're telling somebody something, don't tell them a lie. If you're gonna tell that same thing to God and it's a lie, then you shouldn't be telling it. He led the country in introducing shorter work hours and paid welfare and pension before most employers had even heard of the terms. And because at the time, most stores stayed open till 10 p.m. And he ran a lot of advertisement telling his customers that they should shop during the day, and so that the workers could go spend time with their families in the afternoon at night. And there was two groundbreaking practices when he started in the retail system. First, all goods had one price. There was it was nothing with credit or bargaining. It was fixed price. And second, all purchase came with a money-back guarantee. And it said the practice expressed in what would become the long-standing store slogan of goods satisfactory or money refunded. It's starting in 1884. Timothy Eaton introduced Canada to the wonders of the mail order catalog. He didn't invent this, but he made it popular in Canada, especially in the rural communities, where you can get all kinds of not just clothing, but you can get like farming equipment and other kind of equipment, and it became very important, especially in rural communities, where there was an Eaton Center, and there was in the catalog. You can get clothing, kitchen gadgetry, and a lot of practical things, milking machines, and all kinds of different contraptions. There was also his empire, in terms of the Eaton Center, expands so big from coast to coast, and he employed over at its height 70,000 people. He didn't invent the department store, but he was the first retailer in the world to implement a money-back guarantee, and it would popularize both concept and revolutionize retailing in Canada. So awesome man of God, stood by the Bible principles, honored God, told the truth, and worked hard, and had empathy for his workers, and he loved his brothers. He loved his neighbor. Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, we talked a little bit. He was a Baptist Christian from 1895 to 1979. I talked a little bit about that. Yeah, I already talked about that. Introduced the Bill of Rights, and Pierre Trudeau, the Freedoms Act. He wrote the Right to Freedom Charter. Whereas Canada is founded upon principles and recognizes the supremacy of God and the rule of law. He also said once, the golden thread of faith is woven throughout the history of Canada from its beginning up to the present time. Faith was more important than commerce in the minds of the many European explorers and settlers. Canadians owe a debt to the faith of our fathers and to the spiritual heritage which finds expression in countless ways in our lives. That's Pierre Trudeau. The influence in saying that was the Bible. Ernest Manning from 1908 to 1996 was the Canada's longest standing premier. He was a radio show host called the Canada's National Hour. He was a senator from 1943 to 1963. That's 20 years. And he was instrumental in getting Alberta debt free. We move on to Lester B. Pearson. His father was a Methodist minister. He went to the Methodist Church, and then the United Church was an amalgamation a joining of the churches, Presbyterian and Methodist, into one. And so he was a professor, historian, civil servant, statesman, diplomat, and politician. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957 for organizing the United Nations emergency force to resolve the Suez Canal crisis. He was the fourth prime minister, and during his time as prime minister, he introduced a lot of universal healthcare systems, and we'll talk on the next